Hello and welcome. You're watching Coronavirus Facts versus Myths. I'm Rishika Barua. India has reported 44,230 new cases in the last 24 hours. 555 deaths have been recorded in this time period. India's active caseload has now risen for a third straight day, currently at 4.05 lakhs. This is for the first time that the active caseload has in fact been rising for 3 straight days since the peak of the second wave. India's R number, and this is an important indicator, has also touched 1 today. This is the first real sign that cases indeed are spreading in the country. Now, the worst hit states, let's take a look at the worst hit states in the country. Kerala, with over 22,000 cases for 2 straight days, currently accounts for 50% of India's cases. Maharashtra has reported 7,242 cases. Karnataka has reported a 34% spike in 24 hours, reporting over 2,000 cases. Let's also take a look at the state-wise vaccination tally. Now, the states that are performing the best. Now, remember, Kerala is seeing the biggest spike in cases. Kerala is also the state in India which has the highest number of fully vaccinated people. 17.2% of Kerala's population has been given both shots of the vaccine, followed by Delhi, which is doing well as well at 12.7%. Let's also get you the states which are a cause of concern, the states which are reporting a very low percentage of vaccination. Bihar tops that list. Only 3% of Bihar's population has been vaccinated, followed by Uttar Pradesh, which is at 3.2, Jharkhand, Tamil Nadu, Assam also in the bottom 5. Now, real world data has shown that the world's highest vaccinated countries are seeing a spike in cases still, but a reduction in deaths proportionally. This essentially goes to show that vaccines are working. Now, with around 51.8 lakh vaccinations in the last 24 hours, let's take a look at how India is completely missing its own target. And let's get that graphic up full screen so you can read it better. The 7-day average currently is at 45 lakh doses a day. In order to achieve our target of 60% vaccinations by the end of the year, we need to vaccinate over 90 lakh people on a daily basis. Well, how can we achieve this vaccination target? Will we be able to achieve the vaccination target? To answer some of those questions, we have Dr. Sangeeta Reddy, the Joint Managing Director of Apollo Hospitals, joining us. Thanks very much, Dr. Reddy, for being with us. You know, the million-dollar question at the moment is, how can India ramp up vaccinations? And do you think that imposing a vaccine mandate is perhaps a good idea?
So I think that ultimately the best way to do it is when there is appropriate communication and people are inspired from within to step forward. Just let's look at all the phases which have been happening. First, we had a vaccine shortage. Then we had a hesitancy. At the same time, you know, India came up with a good public health focused methodology of, supplying the vaccine, and the private sector and the government were giving vaccines. Then they, have been flexible and reacting to multiple inputs from public. And now there is the private sector giving vaccine, there's the government giving vaccine completely free. However, from our peak, which I think in June we had done about 4.12 crores, that June 19 to 25 that week. In July, it dropped to about 91 lakh vaccines for that week. But the good news is that, everybody has been worried, and now it's stepped back up to about 2.8 crores for the week that's just gone by, July 24 to 30th. So if we keep up the pace and the pressure to say, come forward for vaccination, if we have heightened degrees of awareness, good availability of the vaccine, easy usage, possibly, some more subsidizing of the vaccine in the private sector, if that could happen, if the government could find a way to bring it at a lower cost, that would ramp it up. But either way, I think everybody is trying. We must push forward, and I request public who are listening to this, there are many people who have not taken the vaccine, who have access to it. I request people to really come forward, because you're not just saving yourself, you're saving the community, and you're also contributing to the economy, because the faster we're covered, the sooner everyone will be safe.
You know, you've made two important points. One, of course, is appealing to people, and the second about private hospitals. I want to first address the point on appealing to people. You know, countries around the world, and we've been reporting on these stories, have found innovative ways to incentivize vaccinations, whether it's lotteries or scholarships, or, you know, in New York, we reported yesterday they're giving out $100 bills to people who are getting their first shot at the state-run centers. Does the government need to think out of the box, or do you think that, you know, we need to act like governments who are also now looking to make life difficult for the unvaccinated? Do some of those strategies need to come into play?
I think that it is time to add a bit more pressure on people. So, you know, colleges and schools, as they open, let all the faculty definitely be vaccinated as a rule. Many are doing it out of their own initiative, but I think some rules and some stringency in terms of vulnerable zones must definitely come into play. Incentives, of course, an incentive is always nice, and let's see how it evolves. Now, I think the fact that there is an adequate mechanism, there's a good COVID app which is structuring and tracking, the public and the private are working together. The core system is in place. It's now time to change gears and step up the pace of vaccination.
There are questions that are being asked by the government on private hospitals and usage of vaccine. The government's in fact alleged that the private sector is not even buying the entire 25% that's been allotted to them. Do you think more cooperation is needed at this juncture?
So I think the government was looking at the utilization of the 25% through the COVID app. There are many hospitals who had actually bought directly from the manufacturer just before that. So, for example, Apollo has already given over 4 million doses. So we've been doing our best to make this happen, and we're using every avenue and every channel, our clinics, our hospitals, everybody to really push the vaccination. I think we must realize that a vast majority of India lives in rural areas where maybe the number of private hospitals are limited. So now we have to move into partnering with general practitioners and standalone doctors. So that's a strategy that we're trying to look at as well, to increase the pace and the outreach. But the point we made first, please, can media continue to help in reducing vaccine hesitancy?
Right.
Because you know, there is some level of, we have our centers open, but we're not seeing the type of demand that we expected to see.
You know, that's it's very interesting that you talk about the demand, because I do think that it is a demand and a supply problem. And, you know, while of course we're addressing the demand question, and I think everyone's doing their bit to address that, what's really happening on the supply side? Do you think a lot more still needs to be done? Do you think India should have diversified its vaccine basket sooner? Because we do have approvals being given to vaccines, but no vaccines in sight. For instance, the Moderna vaccine, we don't know when it's going to come into the market. The Sputnik vaccine is also still being given at very select few centers.
So I think this is an evolving scenario, and you have to balance availability, production capacity, safety, and scientific models. But I do foresee that in the next 2 months, we will have more vaccines in the market. We'll have different types of vaccines also coming up. And all these will not only enhance the pace of vaccination, but potentially maybe even reduce the price. But overall, I believe that it's a very dynamic market. I just want to, you know, do a quick recap of all the CDSO. So CDSO granted permission for the intranasal adenovirus one to Bharat Biotech in February itself. And in fact, Apollo also participated in that trial. Maybe we'll talk about intranasal.
Yes, in fact, I did want to ask you about the intranasal vaccine, because you tweeted about it, and that was very interesting as well. Do you think it will be a game changer?
I do think, but I'll quickly call attention to 2 more. I think May 12th, the second and phase trial started for the other, which is the inactivated SARS vaccine for the age group of, you know, the younger, for children. So that's an interesting trial which is going on. We look forward to those results. And then Cadilla's vaccine, which is actually, the trial was for children 12 years and above. Earlier, it's always been 18 years and above. The Cadila one is 12 years and above. And this is a whole DNA virus. So there, many things in the pipeline. There's J&J, there's Cadila, there's the intranasal, there is another vaccine for children. So I think India is just moving ahead step by step.
Yes.
And has continued to stay positive, request people to start moving for the vaccine. I'll quickly, move into why I believe that the intranasal vaccine is going to be very interesting if it pushes forward. I mean, if it achieves the scientific validation and the CDSO permission.
Yes.
Is because currently the injected vaccines, they reduce all the vaccines all of us have taken, they reduce symptomatic COVID cases. They definitely prevent severe illness. They may still allow for asymptomatic infections. And when there is an asymptomatic infection, that means a person can pass this on to someone else. And as long as that is happening, the virus will continue to be, in the population or,
Yes.
from pandemic, it moves to endemic.
Yes.
The power of an intranasal is that the coronavirus, it takes up residence first in the mucosa of the nose, where, the mucus secreting surfaces in the nose and the throat. And they are actually the first line of defense against the inhaled virus. So the intranasal vaccine also, you take away the syringe and the needle, and it's just like a nasal spray. So it's easier to give, it'll be more cost effective.
Right.
And it triggers the production of the antibody, the immunoglobulin A, which can block the infection. So this response, which is called what they call sterilizing immunity, it reduces the chance for somebody to pass on the virus. And there's a very interesting reference case study that the scientists have done, which combined it to the movement of the polio vaccine. When Jonas Salk first introduced the polio vaccine,
Right.
it was intramuscular, it was an injection. But 5 years later, and this is 1960, a long time ago,
Yes.
Albert Sabin actually brought the new polio vaccine, which came in through the mouth, which
Right.
was oral.
Right.
And this was the inactivated virus form, because by coming in with the gut mucosa,
Yes.
it made it more, effective.
But
So,
we're actually putting out that graphic on our screen, since you've been talking about the intranasal vaccine on who is developing it and at what stage of development it is. It's mostly phase 1 for most of the vaccines, and some vaccines that are now entering into phase 2. So what's the timeline for a nasal vaccine, very quickly before we let you go?
So I'm really not the authority on this. This is CDSO and
Yes.
all the scientific agencies. This may be 3 to 6 months away.
3 to
I
6
think
months.
the larger point I'm making, and please don't hold me to that, the
Yes.
larger point I'm making is that we must push and use what we have
Right.
and continue research and development and manufacturing to become more pervasive,
All right.
broader in its reach, and more acceptable to the population. But for now, the most important message is current vaccines are good, public to please take them.
Okay, I think that's the perfect note to end this conversation. Thanks so much, Dr. Sangeeta Reddy. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much. Namaste.
Well, speaking of vaccines and vaccine mandates, a de facto mandate is causing a lot of controversy in Europe. There have been protests in Parliament as governments around the world are now strategizing to make life difficult for those who are not vaccinated. To talk a little more about this, we have DW correspondent Nicole Flinch joining us. Thanks so much, Nicole, for being with us. A de facto vaccine mandate has caused quite a controversy. A health pass was passed in Parliament. There have been protests in France after that. What more can you tell us?
Well, in Germany, like in many other countries around the world, vaccinated people currently enjoy the same freedoms as tested people. But with the accuracy of rapid tests increasingly under scrutiny and the Delta variant rapidly advancing, some prominent figures here are demanding a rethinking of the current handling. Now, critics argue that restrictions for the unvaccinated, including tested unvaccinated people, would amount to a vaccine mandate through the back door. That governments would maintain their stance, saying, well, it's up to you to get get vaccinated or not. We're not forcing you, but that large parts of the public sphere would then be off limits to the individuals in question. Proponents of these measures see it as a way of making vaccines more attractive to those who don't think it's necessary to protect themselves and those around them, but those opposed say it discriminates those who, for one reason or another, don't want or can't get the shot. This discussion is, of course, far from the actual vaccine mandates we're seeing in countries like France or Greece, where healthcare workers now have to get a shot to be able to work or receive pay, and that has a lot of people very angry, so much so that we saw violent protests against the measures in both countries over the weekend.
All right, very interesting to actually, see those developments. I also want to ask you, Nicole, about the flood situation in Germany about 2 weeks ago. How has that impacted the COVID situation?
There hasn't been a significant impact just yet, but authorities fear that different factors in the aftermath of the flooding might lead to an increase in case numbers in the affected regions. On the one hand, there are rescue and cleanup operations where people simply had other things on their minds than sticking to social distancing or mask wearing rules. And on the other, there are, of course, emergency accommodations. Thousands of people crammed into often basically windowless gyms or other indoor spaces. That is a potentially dangerous scenario in the midst of a pandemic.
All right.
But authorities were quick to act and have set up emergency vaccination sites to help keep this disaster from becoming a super spreader event.
All right. Well, Nicole, thanks so much for joining us with all those updates. Well, on to our special campaign, Vaccinate India, in partnership with Google. We're discussing questions you may have about the coronavirus vaccine. And to answer some of those questions, Dr. Kunal Sarkar, cardiac surgeon, Medica Hospital, Kolkata, joins us. Thanks very much, Doctor, for being with us. I want to begin by asking you about COVID immunity. How long does it take to develop immunity after you've been vaccinated?
Well, you see, there has been varying reports about it, but we would like to believe that from about 3 weeks after vaccination, immunity starts building into the system. And after we've had 2 doses, there is every reason to believe that it should last in our system about a period of a year. But we have to wait for more reports, more studies, more trials before we can see that with a little bit more certainty.
Right.
We've got to wait for a little bit more data.
It's very interesting, this question coming in at a time when Israel's actually decided to offer a third jab to those above the age of 60. Anyone who was vaccinated 6 months ago is now essentially eligible for a third jab if they're above 60. So that, in a certain sense, is a testimony on how long immunity actually lasts.
Well, yes and no, because Israel probably, they sped up the track. They vaccinated almost 75% of population, but their entire vaccination was from Pfizer, mRNA vaccine.
That's right.
And their plans were a little bit upset with the emergence of the Delta variant. So Pfizer doesn't seem to be aiming as accurately towards the Delta as it did the other strains. So maybe, because Pfizer themselves have come up with this advisory that their level of protection increased a little bit more against Delta with the third jab, because with the jabs, they are offering near about 40% protection so far, which is much below what they did for the alpha and the beta variant.
Right. And what about vaccine immunity after 1 dose? How much level of protection do you have after a single shot vis-a-vis, a second shot?
You see, that wasn't too bad till we had alpha and beta playing around, because till the Indian Delta strain emerged, the majority stakeholder in the market was the UK strain. And even with the UK strain, 1 dose was fairly effective in giving protection from serious disease. But I think, the characteristics, the behavior of Delta seem to have changed that understanding a bit, because with Delta, I think everybody is insisting that we better get the 2 doses in the right time.
Right. You spoke earlier about the Pfizer vaccine and the efficacy against the Delta variant. Speaking of Pfizer, the other question that a lot of people want to know is how do mRNA vaccines work? We're told this is a relatively newer technology.
Well, it is, probably if we look at so-called breaking science in this part of the pandemic, we really haven't broken much into the pathophysiological mysteries of the virus. But in terms of vaccine development technology, mRNA was kind of coming for a few years, but we managed to stabilize the mRNA molecule outside of the human body. But the bad part of the good news is that it is very specifically targeted, right? So unlike things like vaccine or Covishield, which has a broader target to aim at, they are probably aiming the dart at a very specific target, and that is why with a little bit variations here and there, mutations here and there, their efficacy seems to be getting a little bit blunted.
All right. Well, Dr. Sarkar, thanks so much. It was a very important clarification. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Rishika. Thanks a lot.